Last week, I published a video about 40 minutes after OpenAI admitted that one of their models broke out of a sandbox and hijacked Hugging Face. That got a 6.4% click-through. And my channel straight up never cleared 2%. 53% of that traffic came from people typing the story into search. And the top search term was literally just the two company names smashed together. Then about a day later, the big channels published their versions, and it was over in a good way. So I went looking at why. And what I found is that there's a gap somewhere between 24 and 48 hours from when a story is breaking and when the channels with a real audience ship their coverage. That's production time. They're not slow, they're just making a video the normal way. Now, I can make a full video in under an hour. So that gap is the only structural advantage that I have over people with 100 times my subscribers. The problem is that you can't exploit a gap you don't know that opened. The OpenAI story broke at 2 a.m. my time. So I built something so that I stop needing luck. It's called First Responder. It's been running on this machine for about 4 days, and the median time from a story breaking to my phone buzzing is about 9 minutes. I linked the repo in the pinned comment. Take it if you want it. Now, I want to be upfront about how this got built because it matters for the rest of this video. I didn't write this code. I described what I wanted to Claude, and it wrote the code. Which is a thing people say dismissively, like it doesn't count. Stick with me on this, though, because the interesting part isn't that the machine wrote the code. It's what I already had to know in order to stop it from confidently building me something that's broken. That's most of this video. All right, so what does First Responder actually do? It pulls a list of sources on a schedule, notices things that are actually new, and pings my phone. That's the whole idea. Everything past that is the part where reality fights back. So let's get into it. The first thing is tiers. My original spec said pull everything every 30 minutes. And that's wrong. And it's wrong in a way that's easy to miss. If your budget is being altered within 45 minutes and you pull every 30, you're spending a median 15 minutes of that budget doing absolutely nothing. So the sources are tiered. Lab pages and safety institutions get pulled every 5 minutes, and Google News gets pulled every 10. The press gets pulled every 15, and individual bloggers every 30 minutes. Archive every hour, because papers don't break, they just appear. That sounds expensive, and it isn't. Because most feeds support conditional requests. You ask, has anything changed since this timestamp? And 28 out of 39 of them say, nope, and then they send you nothing. So that means a 5-minute poll is mostly a tiny, empty response. Now, the 6 things that would have quietly wrecked this, which are actually content here. 1, Twitter's API can't read jack shit. I had API credentials sitting on a project folder. Great. They returned 403 on every single read endpoint, and it can't read another user, and it can't run a search. I can't even read my own account. And the reason isn't quota. The rate limit header cheerfully reports 39,999 requests remaining. It's that the app is a legacy one that isn't attached to a developer project. So V2 refuses it on principle before it even looks at a quota. So if you assume I have keys, therefore I have access, you build your whole X integration and find out at the end. So we probed it first and wrote down the answer. The workaround is RSS bridges. Knitter.net serves any handles posts as a feed. 10 out of 10 handles just brought back feeds, so that was great. And here's the part that made me laugh. When we first tested it, the top entry on Sam Altman's feed was his post about the security incident. The exact story that made me build this thing in the first place. So the path I was testing would have caught the story that caused me to test it, if that makes sense. So let's move on to the second thing. A source can lie about being healthy. There's another Twitter mirror called XCancel. You request a handle's feed, and it returns HTTP 200, valid XML. Well-formed, parses perfectly. And the only entry inside it says, RSS feeder not yet whitelisted. Think about what that does to a normal health check. Status code 200, feed parses, no errors, green forever. Your monitor sits there reporting perfect health while receiving literally nothing. And you find out 3 weeks later when you notice you haven't been alerted about anything. Broken monitoring that looks healthy is worse than monitoring that's obviously dead. Because dead, you fix. So health here is defined on content, not status. A source is healthy only if it parses, has entries, and has produced something new inside a window derived from that source's own publishing rhythm. Meter, M-E-T-R, posts about once a week. So a week of silence from Meter is fine. A week of silence from TechCrunch is a fire. The third thing, some servers can tell which library you're using. XAI's new page kept returning 403 to the poller. Meanwhile, I could fetch it by hand fine, 200 no problem. The difference wasn't headers, we tested that. Byte identical headers, one library gets 403, the other gets 200. Cloudflare is fingerprinting the TLS handshake itself, so it knows it's talking to a Python HTTP client no matter what the client claims to be in its headers. And there's a bit here that I actually like, which is that we'd already gotten this wrong once. There's an earlier conclusion that the 403 was transient because 6 out of 6 retries succeeded. That test used the working library. It proved nothing about the poller. Wrong conclusion from a real experiment, which is the most common way to be wrong. 4. Anthropic doesn't have an RSS feed. Neither does Apollo Research, or the UK's AI Security Institute, or XAI, or Zifu, or Quen, or Moonshot. We had 4 different URL patterns tried on Anthropic, all returned to 404, which is a little rich given that the story that started all this broke on exactly that kind of page. So there's a whole second source type that just fetches the HTML and watches for new links to appear. And the Chinese labs are worse. Moonshot's blog is 615 bytes of empty shell that assembles itself in your browser. AKA, there's nothing in the HTML to read. You need a whole headless browser to see it. So instead, they get covered through their X accounts and targeted news queries. And that limitation is written down rather than pretended away. 5. 20 outlets covering one story is one story. When the Moonshot accusation broke, 38 articles landed. If each one pings me, I mute the app by lunch. So there's a clustering step. Every item gets embedded, which is a fancy way of saying turns into a list of numbers that captures roughly what it's about. And anything close enough to an existing cluster joins it instead of starting a new one. That runs locally on my old 1080 for free. It takes about 12 milliseconds per item. But the first version of that produced a single story containing 47 articles spanning 22 months. It had merged OpenAI's O1 mini launch from 2024 with evaluation posts from this year, because they're semantically similar and some undated posts act as glue between them. A story is an event. Events have times. So it follows that an item can only join a cluster whose first report is written within 72 hours. And undated stuff can only cluster with other undated stuff. Obviously, in hindsight, not obvious to a language model that was asked to cluster similar documents because that's exactly what it did. 6. The number that actually matters isn't the alert. It's the part that I'm most pleased with, and it's the reason that this thing works at all. Simply knowing a story exists is half of it. The other half is knowing whether I'm early enough to that story to bother. So every cluster carries how many distinct outlets have it and how fast that number is growing. And it gets a state. So on a lab's own disclosure, a primary source, usually nobody else has it if you catch it in time. That's the best position on Earth. Drop everything. So if there's 2 outlets, but it's also climbing fast, the window is open, but it's closing. Ship now or don't. 14 outlets and 5 hours old? Forget about it. Everybody's already on it. Go do something else. And really, that last state saves me more time than the alerts do. There is one catch. Counting sources in my own list would have been wrong because a single Google News feed can front 36 different publishers. So the real publisher gets pulled out of the feed metadata and counted properly. Otherwise, every story looks like a wide open window, and I'd be chasing dead ones all day. So now for the real question. Does it work? It's been running for a hot minute now. Median alert latency between 9 and 12 minutes against a 45-minute target. And no cap, most of the time I just go into my Discord server where I webhooked it and read the latest story. Total cost, and I priced this carefully, is about $2 to $3 per month. Embeddings are free because they run on hardware that I already own. Now, back to the thing that I said at the start. Every one of these 6 problems is something that a language model will not warn you about. It'll happily write you a health check on status codes. It'll cluster your documents without asking whether time matters. It'll build the X integration on credentials nobody tested. And not because it's stupid, because it's answering what you asked. And you didn't know to ask. I've been writing software for 30 years. I feel like a broken record because I've said that multiple times in my videos, but I've never seen anything close to this for raw speed. This thing exists because I could describe it faster than I could have typed it, and I'm not going back. But what I brought wasn't code. It was the suspicion, knowing that a 200 doesn't mean healthy. Knowing to check credentials before designing around them. Knowing that similar isn't the same as related. That's the part that came from having been burned before. And I don't know a way to shortcut it. English is the new programming language. For sure. Judgment is still the compiler, though. Repo's in the description. It's rough. It's mine. M2 isn't built yet, so currently alerts on everything new instead of filtering with an agent. If you fix something, let me know. I'm gonna go touch grass.